What's going on, everybody? Feder here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I have two 3D printers for us to check out. We have the Mingda Magician X2. There's going to be a link popping up right over here where you can see the unboxing. I did live on stream where we did some testing and I kind of chatted with you guys for several hours and checked out the machine there. And as well, we have the Sovol SV06, which I also did a live unboxing. There should be a popping up right over here in the same fashion. Actually, during both of those streams, the companies went ahead and jumped in on stream. I wasn't aware that they were going to join. I did not tell them in advance, so it was kind of cool to know that they're there standing behind their product. I thought that was pretty neat. But in both cases, we unboxed them, we checked out everything that was going in, we assembled them, and we did a bunch of, we did a test print just to see what was going on. I think in some cases I did 2 or so test prints. In both, we kind of went over the settings and things along those lines, and you got a gist for what the machine was for. After that, I did a couple more prints, and I took some time to write a cons and pros list. The reason why I do it this way is because if you can get through the cons of a machine, you can definitely get through the pros of a machine. So I like to put the cons up front. In this case, we're going to be doing a little bit of a battle between two kind of similar machines. At the time of recording this, the Mingda is worth about $250 or so, and the SV06 was around that price point, but it's actually down to around $205. I'm gonna have links for both of them down in the description below. If you're interested, check out the pricing there, because both of them do fluctuate in the price just a little bit, and they go on sales, and they often include filament spools, things along those lines. And the reason why these are getting a little bit cheaper is because of the advancements in Core XY machines and enclosed machines that have been coming out for the past year and a half or so. And because of that, machines like this, I think about a year and a half ago, would have probably been $500–600. They're completely feature-packed machines. For example, with this SV06, this is essentially 80% of a Prusa for about a third of the price, maybe even less than a third, maybe about a quarter of the price of a Prusa. So there's a lot of machine here, and don't get discouraged just because there's machines out there that are very popular for $1,000. You don't necessarily need to drop that kind of cash to get in on a really good quality machine that's going to let you 3D print and create all sorts of stuff. In fact, I would say that most of this room and most of the projects that I've ever done were done on significantly slower machines that are coming out right now. So the industry is kind of moving there, which is fine. Obviously, it's a really great time to be in 3D printing, but a lot of people seem to be getting more and more discouraged about machines like this, and I don't necessarily think that's the right step. I think right now is a great time to take advantage of machines like this that would have been premium machines that are now considered to be right around the middle in terms of their price and their features. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right in to the cons of both machines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump between both of them, and we'll kind of talk about more in detail about both of these things as we go through the list. All right, let's get into it. All right, so first up we have the SV06, and the first on the list is the bearings need lubrication. So the SV06 has linear motion, so instead of having wheels like the Mingda machine, it has linear rods, and on those are bearings, and you can kind of hear them. They're somewhat loud when moving kind of quickly, and I did notice that they come dry. Some people warned me in the live that you needed to actually remove them. I don't think you need to actually remove them, but you do need to potentially clean them and pack them back with grease. Not a hard task, but it is something that you might be interested in. What I ended up doing was just putting a ton of grease on the rails, going back and forth so that that grease goes into the bearings themselves, and it has gotten much smoother feeling, and it is a really great feeling machine. But that is a downside, is that the bearings seem to come without being properly lubricated out of the box, at least for my particular machine. One con for the Mingda is that the packaging material is messy. In fact, this is my fourth Mingda Magician machine, or Mingda machine in general, and for all of them I had to have a vacuum, and when I knew I was going to unbox that, I brought a vacuum down, and the good thing I did, because the packaging is a bit messy. The reason why that's even a con is because when you take the machine out, the lead screws are greased, and those little foam pieces, they kind of get into the lead screw. And if you miss some, that could potentially create a bump in your lead screw, something you might not notice at first, and maybe cause some kind of problems with printing. Just a silly thing to kind of complain about, but at the same time, this is, like I said, the fourth machine, and the fourth machine using the same packaging materials. At Mingda, you have to improve that packaging because it is a bit of a mess. All right, then going back to the SV06, there's no cover on the back of the screen. I know this is minor, but when you're using this kind of old school screen with this knob with your thumb, the first thing I like to do is kind of grab the screen, and what you end up doing is touching bare PCB. Nothing's really going to happen, but it just feels cheap right away, and this is a really nice machine, and this kind of just that little user experience kind of takes me away from it just a little bit. Now, if you stick to it this way, if you kind of grab the edge, you're fine. And there are lots of printable covers for the back here, just like for Enders. But it just something to note. I found that to be a con. For the Mingda, the stock profile was stringing a bit, and you can see that in all the prints. We'll go over that after these two lists. Yeah, the stock profile that I found on Cura, which has the machine in it, well, technically the X, but the X2 is so similar in that sense that it didn't really matter. The stock profile needs just a hair more retraction for it to stop stringing. Not necessarily a big deal. The stringing was not serious, but still worth noting that the stock profile on the SV06 was slightly better. Back to the SV06, it's hard to see the nozzle from the front to see the first layer. I know, once again, you can just look from the side or the back, but when you're just starting out, which I think these are more geared towards, looking from the front is definitely the easiest way, especially depending on where you have this machine. And the cooling solution on this printer blocks the nozzle completely, so you kind of have to peek around the side or the bag and kind of see the first layer that way. Not a big deal, once again, and there are printable solutions for this, but still something note, the user experience is noteworthy. Then we have the stock touchscreen on the Mingda is a bit finicky and hard to press the files to print. I do like the UX, and I'll go over that a little bit later on the machine, on the actual screen, like the UI itself. However, when you're picking the file to print, you have to actually use something small, because my fat fingers end up pressing one or two things, and almost every single time I try to go to print a file, I end up clicking the wrong one. I have to go back. It's just a little bit finicky. The rest of the UI is very large and easy to press, but that specific thing where the UI gets a little bit smaller, that was kind of just, once again, takes you out of a pleasant user experience. On the SV06, the parts cooling needs to be improved, and you can notice that in some of the prints. We'll go over a little later, but I'll show you anyway. You might be able to see it here. This blue one was printed on the SV06, and you can see right over here where there's extreme overhangs, this is definitely a rough surface because of cooling, whereas here on the Mingda, perfect cooling on this side. Back to the Mingda, for the last con on my list is it has some proprietary parts, such as the main board and a bunch of parts on the tool head. So that might not be a problem, especially for what the Mingda is geared for, which I'll cover a little bit later. But just to note, if you're the type of person that would really like to work on their own machine, maybe upgrade it, maybe just maintain it yourself instead of going with the company or using a warranty, that type of thing, the Mingda machine definitely has some proprietary parts, but that is also a part of its whole aesthetic and its whole form and the purpose of what it exists for. So that might not be a con for you, but for me personally, someone that likes to not only tinker but also maintain my own machines, I kind of like machines like this where I can go ahead and touch on everything and buy a part on Amazon and get it in 2 days instead of going through a warranty and waiting a month, to receive something from China. Just as an example, not saying that's the case with the Mingda. In fact, all of my Mingda machines that I have had have been very reliable and trouble-free. Just saying, proprietary parts. All right, I think it's time to move to the pros. I didn't find too many things wrong with it, so if you can get through those lists, I think you're going to enjoy either one of these machines. Let's talk about the pros. All right, just like the cons, let's start with the SV06. The first one on my list is that the aftermarket is huge for this machine, both in printables and mods. So if you go on the internet, if you go on printables.com or Thingiverse and you type in SV06, you're going to find a ton of solutions for little things or even just aesthetics. There's a lot of a community built around this machine, and it's for good reason. It's because it's modeled essentially after a Prusa. There's no need to hiding it. It's just the way that this machine is. It's meant to be a very affordable version of a Prusa, obviously by a different brand with their own marketing and parts and that type of thing, but this is an open source machine, so there's a lot of aftermarket for it. For the Mingda, it is completely silent. You can hear some fans and you can hear printing, but in comparison to these, when these are both running next to each other, you literally can't hear the Mingda, you just hear the SV06. Because it has V-slot wheels, because it has quieter fans, it is just a quieter operating machine. So that is definitely a pro for the Mingda. Back to this, it has linear motion. Just like I mentioned, linear motion is better in my opinion because it has no potential, it has less potential for trouble. For example, with V wheels, as we saw that it is more quiet, they are somewhat reliable, but they have eccentric nuts, they can go out of tune, they can wear faster than linear motion like on the SV06. So I think, in my personal opinion, the pro here is that it uses linear rods, and that ensures that the left and right motion of the X is straight, the forth and aft motion of the bed is straight, and same with the Z. So that's just an opinion. I know a lot of people like V wheels, and that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with them, but like I said, there's a little bit less wear and a little bit less of a security. Like, for example, if you ding the channel on a V slot, you're gonna have you're gonna see that in your print, for example, whereas here you're much less likely to do that type of thing. All right, then we're going on to back to the Mingda. It looks polished, and it does. Something about the machine just looks really complete. It has no wiring mess. Everything is on ribbons. Everything is together. It uses these molded plastics. There's a handle. It is just a really good, polished looking machine. And with the new X2 comes these little covers to the left of the actual head there, and it just makes it look complete and nice. Whereas when you're looking at the Sovol, it does look nice, but it does look like a machine. You see its belts, you see its lead screws, you see a bunch of wiring coming out in the back. It just looks a bit more like a machine, whereas the Mingda looks a little bit more like an appliance and a bit more complete. All right, this machine, the Sovol, is open source, and it's based on Prusa machines, like I mentioned a couple times. Open source is good because you can get all the parts, you can print your own stuff, you can use those files to modify things, you can put in a new board and very easily connect it to whatever you want. You can rewrite the firmware. There's all sorts of benefits that come with open source machines, including a huge aftermarket. The Mingda is definitely not that. It has its own proprietary parts, its own board. You can still do a bunch of things to that machine, but way less in comparison to the SV06. It has a really decent touch UI. I'm referring to the Mingda because it has a touch screen. But the touch screen, like I said, it has big buttons. All the options are very easy. It's not too in-depth. The SV06 definitely has more options and more available to you for kind of like a more power user. But everything that you might need and a lot of things are automated on the Mingda. I like the UI. I like the interface. I think it's pretty good. Like I said, I've had it on all my other Mingda machines, and I've gotten really used to it. And when you get that used to it, you just go really quickly through everything. You could save whatever you need. This is definitely a good UI. I just had that one problem with selecting actual files on it. The other benefit there, back to the Mingda, is that it has a full-size SD card. No more dealing with the little tiny card. They're a bit faster. You're not going to slip it in between the little cracks and drop it into the casing. Full SD is definitely a good move, as well as a USB-C on the front and a USB-A connection. So that is definitely a big plus for the connectivity between you and the Mingda machine. That's for sure. I have another Pro for the SV06. It's currently priced at $205, which is just a crazy deal. I couldn't get over it. I kind of just stared at it for a long time. $200 couldn't get you even half this machine just, let's just say, 2 years ago. And right now, getting all of this, that's a pretty good deal. That's not always going to be at $250. $205. I think it's going to go back up to around $230, $240, which is still extremely fair for something like this. And that's why I'm comparing both these, because they're priced really similarly. The other pro we have for the Mingda is it has really good parts cooling. It has dual fans, dual-sided. They're pointing from both sides of the nozzle, and there's definitely no issues in cooling whatsoever. It did really well with overhangs, whereas the SV06 lacks just a little bit and could definitely use a larger fan. Once again, really easy to install and update, but out of the box, the Mingda definitely has better cooling. And the last thing I have on the SV06 is its Accessible components for maintenance, whether it's the board or a fan or a motor or a belt or a rod itself. Anything on here you can just grab anywhere you can find 3D printed parts, sometimes even locally at a micro center, for example. If you have a bad probe or the bad screen or a power supply, everything on this machine can be purchased and replaced and modified and changed, and whatever those things that I kind of rambled on earlier in this video you can do to the SV06, and I think that's probably its superpower. It's very affordable, it's basic yet advanced, it still has auto bed leveling, things along those lines. It has every setting that you might want out of Marlin on your screen, but it's still you know, made in a way to give you a really affordable price. So that's kind of its superpower. And then the last one on the list for the Mingda is the cable management is fantastic. Like I said before, there's no cables. The bed cable that you see in the back has its own little place to be. It is mounted with a retaining clip with bolts in it. The ribbon cables are out of the way. There's little pieces that hold them in place. The Mingda Magician is definitely really thought out, and the X2 takes it up a notch with just slight improvements everywhere. And it's just a much better looking machine just in general, if you ask me. Whereas, like I said, this one is for modding, that one is not. And that kind of leads me into the last kind of bit is, you know, what is this for? Who are these machines for? And I do think that both of them are kind of in the same category, but for two different types of people. I think the SV06 is definitely great for someone who, like I said, wants to do their own maintenance, sees an upgrade path here, and wants to kind of modify and be in the hobby. Whereas the X2 by Mingda is definitely a first or second machine, somebody that just wants to get it, you know, hit a level and then just print from the slicer. There's nothing else going on. If something breaks, you can definitely get it maybe from Mingda and other places as well, but that machine is mostly to just use, whereas the SV06, obviously you could use it as well, and it's going to be reliable from what I understand and from here from everyone. But this one is definitely for the tuner, for the tinkerer. This one is for that type of person. And the last question I have on here is, which one would I pick? I personally, I think, would go with the SV06. I think it's pretty close, and I do keep a Mingda. I have a 400 by 400, their large machine, the Magician Pro. I do keep that because it is large. It is pretty much always tuned great from the profile, and I never have to do anything because it does everything itself. So if that's something that's important to you, where you kind of want a hands-free printing experience at this price point, that machine is going to do it. It's not necessarily a speed demon, it's not going to be breaking any speed records, but because of that, it's reliable, it can get the job done, and we'll kind of go over the prints and show that in a second. And then, you know, the SV06 is everything that I've just kind of been saying. It's a nice tinker toy. It's not that it's not going to be able to get the job done. It absolutely will, as you'll see in the prints. But this one is definitely more for those that like to, you know, tune some knobs. All right, and let's take a look at the prints, kind of showcase how they did in my testing, and then we'll go from there. All right, so first up, let's say that the green was printed on the Mingda and the blue was printed on the Sovol. So let's take a look at the benchies. So as you can see here, they're pretty good benchies. The one thing I must say, that the stringing, you can kind of see, I didn't clean this up, but you can kind of see there's definitely a bit of stringing here and there. However, the bottom layer is perfect, the cooling sufficient on both. Everything is totally straight. I don't see a single issue with these, except for stringing on this one and maybe just some inconsistent layer lines here and there, but you can fix that with just ever so, you know, some minor tuning. But if you look on the Sovol, for example, the arches, they are really great. The Mingda actually in this case performed a little bit worse, and I have a feeling that the stringing played a role here, right at the top where there is a little bit of droop, so not quite as clean. Whereas the Sovol, as you can see, the circle, for example, in the back here, and this droop right here is just non-existent. So both of these benchies are great, but I give it to the Sovol in this case. There's also a new benchy on the block. These benchies, the version 2, gets printed upright like this, so you really get to test the overhangs, as well as the bottom has a hinge, so they open in a container fashion. And what that does is it gives you clearance testing, which I also find pretty intriguing. So both of these are almost identical, a tiny bit of stringing here, but as you can see, you can't even tell just after pulling it and kind of rubbing it with your fingers. Not a big deal, you can tune that out within minutes. But if you look at the qualities, you can see the sheen on these things. Both of these came out just absolutely great. Zero interference for me, just, you know, hit print and go. Here's the quality, as you can see, the sheen. Both open freely, no nonsense, looking great. And then finally, I went ahead and found this kind of really interesting thing. This is, and I'll have the link down in the description, but this is a portable fishing rod, a reelless fishing rod that you can kind of just toss in a bag. And I find this really intriguing. This is going to be perfect for like a little mountain bike trip or hiking. The top here can stow your hook. So essentially you put fishing line on the top here, there's a slit on the top, and you can put the hook and store it inside here. And on the bottom there's a little place where you can put some hooks, maybe a couple lures, some weights. So this required some supports. There's threads. This is just a great test for both of these machines. They both took around 8 hours. The Sovol finished about 30 or so minutes ahead, and there was no way that I could tell you which one this was printed on if I didn't already know. The quality is fantastic on both, except the only thing you could really tell is the cooling was insufficient on the very bottom where the overhangs are extreme, as you can see right here on the Sovol. So definitely an upgrade there would be nice. But as far as the clearances on the threads, absolutely perfect on both. Everything screws in here. You can even switch sides on both of these and not even notice. Let's do it. There we go. Green on blue, blue on green. There you go. So you would have your spool, you'd grab your lure, hold your thumb here, and then you kind of toss it and just let it go. Hold your thumb when you're ready, and then spool it back up. What a cool little thing, and also just a fantastic test. As you can see, it also gives you, because they're kind of tall, you can kind of see the non-existent layer lines on both of these prints. So there you go. I think that is a pretty sufficient test for machines like this, and I think we've uncovered a bunch of things. Hopefully you understand both of these machines a little bit better. All right, so that concludes this video. Hopefully you guys got a better idea on both of these machines, the Mingda Magician X2 and the Sovol SV06. I like them both for what they are. I think it's a great time to be in 3D printing because machines like this have trickled all the way down to between $200 and $250. I think that's fantastic, and I think this segment is actually growing very rapidly. Just between me starting these machines to test these machines and while me making this video, I've already seen about 3 other machines that are in this price point that are very similar. So this part of the market is definitely growing exponentially, which is pretty cool because we're all getting a ton of printer. So as always, guys, if you are interested in these, I have affiliate links down below. Please use them if you're interested in purchasing one of these machines, as it helps the channel greatly and costs you nothing, and it makes it easier for you to just pick out what you want out of the bunch. As well as these files, because I really think this is just a neat idea, something you can just throw in a bag or take on a quick trip, hiking, something along those lines. If you have any questions about either of these machines, definitely drop them down in the comments. And I want to thank my Discord members, but more importantly, my Patreon members and my YouTube members. You guys literally fund this channel, so thank you all very, very much. Okay, as always, I'll see you all in the comments. Later.